Welcome. My name is James Boland, and I am the founder and president of the Australian Community. The Australian Community is a 501c3 public charity, and our mission is to connect Australians living in the United States through social, professional, and charitable initiatives. Today, we're speaking with Zjantelle Cammisa Markel. Zjantelle is the principal of Cammisa Markel, a New York-based law firm specializing in immigration. Zjantelle, welcome.
Thank you, James. It's good to be back.
Zjantelle, perhaps we could start where it all began, which was the Presidential Proclamation back in April, I believe, where there were a number of proclamations made that impacted Australians and other nationalities who were on non-immigrant visas, and also green cards and also H-1Bs and a few other visas. Now that's all winding down in, I think it's 2 weeks, December 31st. So perhaps you can speak about, your view of what we're seeing. Are we going to see some major changes? What is it that you're seeing with those proclamations winding down?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were the two proclamations. There was the one in April, and that banned the entry of certain immigrant visa holders and the issuance of immigrant visas, meaning green cards. And that was to go until June 22nd. And then on June 22nd, they issued another proclamation that extended that one, that was banning the entry of immigrants and issuance of green cards to certain categories. And then it also included the non-immigrant categories. So what it was it said that up until December 31st, they were not going to issue green cards outside of the US to spouses of permanent residents and to parents of US citizens and siblings of US citizens. The other main group that was affected were the winners of the DV lottery. It was the 2020 DV lottery. So that's the group of people that found out that they had won the green card lottery in around May 2019. That group of people needed to get their green card sticker, their immigrant visa, issued in their passport by September 30th of this year. And if they didn't, then they would miss out. Even though they won the lottery, they weren't going to be able to get that green card. So then there was this big court case that came out because it seemed as though all those immigrant visa winners were going to miss out. So the court case said, no, look, the proclamation says we have suspended entry, but we haven't suspended the issuance of the visas for that particular category of DV lottery winners. So what we saw in the month of September were the consulates going crazy, and particularly in Australia, and all our clients that were in Australia that thought they were going to miss out on getting the green card that year, actually getting called even by the consulates to come in for their green card interview. And they were able to get the immigrant visa sticker put into their passports, but they haven't been able to enter until this proclamation ends. So as of January 1, all the DV lottery winners that managed to get the green card sticker put in their passport by September 30th will finally be able to come into the US. In fact, they'll have to come into the US because they'll have a deadline. Their immigrant visas are issued for a 6-month period until the validity that their medical was. So when you get a green card through the DV lottery and you have to go through the process of actually getting that green card, you need to get a medical done. And the green card sticker is valid, and that medical is valid for 6 months. And then the green card sticker, what they agreed to do this year was to make the sticker valid until your medical is valid. And so for most people, that is expiring in February or March, and they have to enter the US by that date on the immigrant sticker. And then once they've entered on that, they'll be able to get the green card mailed to them in the mail. And so where that causes a few problems is that some of our clients are still reluctant to travel and get on an airplane. And whereby in September, they thought, okay, by February, March, that should be fine. The presidential proclamation will come to an end. So I've got between January and March to come. A lot of them are still hesitant, and they're asking, well, do you think first of all, do you think this presidential proclamation could get extended? My answer to that is it's possible. We still have the current administration in place until January 20th. So I think if it does get extended, I think shortly after January 20th, I think it would come to an end. And then the other question is, so then they could still enter after January 20th if that was the case. And then the other question I keep getting is, well, do you think that they'll put something in place that extends the period that we'll be able to enter the US? Because I know I'm still scared to travel and get on an airplane, and the COVID situation is still quite bad, and some people have health issues. That I don't know, right? So last March, for the previous year's DB lottery winners that did have to enter by a certain time, they actually said to that group, what we'll do is we'll issue a new visa in your passport and extend the time that you can come in. They haven't said they're going to do that with this batch. Could they? Maybe. I don't think so. So what I've been recommending to our clients is do just plan. If you really want that green card and you want to preserve it from winning that green card lottery, then definitely try to come in by the expiry date on that immigrant visa, and which is definitely going to be before the March 30th date. So I'm really encouraging them to do that. The other groups that were significantly affected, the non-immigrant visa categories, James, were H-1B visas, L visas, H-2B visas, J-1s and L-1s. The way that those people were affected, if they had a valid visa in that category in their passport, they were not affected because they could still travel in and out on that visa. If they did not have that visa yet in their passport on the date of the proclamation in June, there was a ban on the consulates issuing new visas in those categories. Some people were still able to get some issued in those categories, but they had to go through a process of getting what was called a national interest exemption. So they had to argue that their role is in the nation's interest. And the way you would argue that is either a substantial economic benefit to the United States, or that your role was in healthcare, COVID research, critical infrastructure, and they had listed certain groups. So if you could satisfy that your role was critical, then you could still get a visa, but you had to jump through hoops. It wasn't easy, and under this, because the proclamation has put this ban in place until December 31st. The group that was almost impossible to get a visa issued, because it's very hard to argue that your role is in the national interest, is if you were on the J1. There were certain groups of J1 that were exempt from this. So researchers, there are medical professions that can be on the J1. Those were exempt. But the main group of Australian J1s that were affected were the people that come in on there's a trainee J1 that people can come in for 18 months and work in their field of their degree for 18 months and get work experience in the US. There's an intern J1 as well. And there's a J1 that's just for Australians and New Zealanders, actually, which is called a summer work travel J1 that's valid for a year. So the summer work travel J1 is actually available to all nationalities, but for all the other nationalities, it's only available for 3 months. So it's typically used by other nationalities during their summer holidays. They'll come from Europe, and they'll come in their summer holidays from university and work in the United States. That summer work travel J1 is for university graduates. They have to either be within 12 months of having graduated from university or still in university. So they could defer for a year, come to the US and work and go back. They just had to have completed at least one full semester. So a lot of the people that work, a lot of the younger people that come into the US and get work experience and have been working in hospitality, a lot of our hospitality clients really take advantage of being able to have Australians work in their businesses that are on this summer work travel J1. So this year we've seen people who have not been able to get that summer work travel J1. We actually did get one for a client, but we were able to get it for her because she was already in the US, and we changed her status to this J1 category from within the US. So the proclamation, it's a great example of how this proclamation works. It prevented the issuance of that visa abroad. So if she was outside of the US, she wouldn't have been able to get it and come in. But because she was here already, she was actually on an E3 and lost her job, and she qualified for the J1. So we were able to change her status to J1. But she was then stuck here and couldn't travel. She can't travel internationally until after January 1 when the proclamation ends, because if she travels out, she needs the visa in her passport to be able to get back in. And she can't get the visa in her passport until after January 1. So after January 1, that will offer her some freedom and anyone else in that situation some freedom. It will also now allow some, Australians to come in on that summer work travel J1. And the reason why you couldn't get a national interest exemption for that category was because it's hard to say, my role at getting work experience is critical. So that was the category that was most significantly affected. The other one is for senior executives that were here on an L1. Some of them needed to renew their visa during that time, since June until December. We had a client in this situation. So they were able to renew from within the US, but if they were going to travel internationally, they wouldn't be able to come back in because they would need the L visa put in their passport to get back in, or be willing to go through the process of getting this national interest exemption approved to get the visa to come in. And there was some risk in that. What if they didn't approve the national interest exemption for you? So there were some exceptions to this. So if any of these non-immigrants were married to a US citizen or a US permanent resident or have US citizen children, they are exempt from that. But it has affected a large group of people, and particularly, there are Australians not only on the E3 here. We do have a lot of Australians here on the L1 senior executives that are intercompany transfers. The L1 is for people who have worked for the company that they're working for in the US abroad and transferred with the company in the US. We've had a lot of people, like I mentioned, on the J1. We have a lot of Australians on the H1B, and it was the same situation with the H1B. So anyone that won the H1B lottery this year who was Australian and filed a change of status, that would have gone into effect on October 1, but they won't be able to travel internationally until once this proclamation ends on January 1. So James, while the presidential proclamations did not have a significant impact in effect because people weren't traveling anyway, I think that the proclamations coming to an end will provide much relief, because it was a lot of the psychological impact of feeling trapped here, and with a lot of Australians feeling like in those categories, like I can't travel, and what if there is an emergency? What if I do need to leave the United States and I'm not going to be able to get back in? So it has created a lot of anxiety, even if Australians aren't actually traveling. So just having the knowledge after January 1 and the proclamation coming to an end that you can travel if you need to, if you're in those categories, is going to provide a lot of relief. And so that's great.
Zjantelle, we've been receiving some feedback from some Australians who have been able to enter the United States on the visa waiver program. And these are people who have entered before. And the feedback we're getting is that the border protection agents are being a little bit more diligent in asking things like, how long are you staying? Where are you staying? Showing that, being able to show that you'll be able to support yourself while you're here, etc. Not only, I suppose, you might be receiving similar feedback, but perhaps it's important just to stress to our listeners that just because you've got a visa doesn't mean there's guarantee entry into the United States.
Yeah, James, I think what's important is that we still have travel restrictions into the United States. One of the other travel bans has been from anyone that's been in the last 14 days in a Schengen country, in China, Iran, the UK, Ireland. So as a result, you will have, Brazil, nearly forgot Brazil on that list. So you will have the immigration officers certainly ask, where have you been on this trip if you're returning to the US? And it's not only people on visa waiver, it's anyone even on a visa, even green card holders. And even citizens. I actually am a US citizen now, and I traveled internationally, and they asked, where have you been? What countries have you been to? But certainly non-immigrants in certain categories are banned from entering. If you're a citizen or permanent resident, you're exempt from these rules and these travel bans. But if you're a non-immigrant and you have been in the last 14 days in one of these countries, they won't let you in. They really won't. And in fact, even if you traveled to a place that is not banned, but caught a connecting flight into a place that's banned, you will not be able to come back into the US. So that's really essential for people to know, because I've had clients that have said, okay, well, I'm just going to Croatia or Turkey, which is not banned, but I have to fly there through Amsterdam. And they're not realizing that that flight through Amsterdam, that connecting flight, is going to ban them from entry, even though they were only in Amsterdam for an hour. So anyone who is traveling right now, and that doesn't end on January 1. We don't know when that travel ban is going to end. So just want to remind people that is not part of the proclamations that end. So certainly still, if you're going to resume traveling internationally, you want to double check the rules of the country you're entering, or when you're returning to the US, just double check those rules and those travel bans that are in place and where you've been, for sure.
And of course, now to the question that everyone is asking, and that is the US consulates that are approving E3s. We do have some data on that from October. We will have November about mid-December. But the standout again was Mexico City with 60 E3s approved, 12 E3Ds and 32 E3Rs. And that was a total of 183 E3s that were approved that month. Sydney came in at 59. So obviously Mexico City is the flavor of the month, or has been for a few months now, primarily because it's easy to travel there. It's cheap to travel there. There's no quarantine regulations around that. And it is a relatively safe city if you're staying close to the consulate. So,
and James, the other nice thing about Mexico City is that they were processing the E3 really quickly, within a day or two even. So that was very attractive to people as well. Close by, no travel restrictions getting in, no quarantine when you're there, no quarantine coming back. And well, you did have to quarantine once you're back, but there were no restrictions in coming back from Mexico. And then the ease of being able to just do it by going there and coming back pretty quickly.
So it's a little bit like, when you're traveling on the road and your GPS says there's an accident ahead, take the next exit. And then you find out that everyone got that same message and everyone's taking that exit, and there's more probably traffic on the exit than if you stayed on the highway. We obviously are seeing a lot of demand for people wanting Mexico City if you're on the East Coast, or Monterey maybe if you're on the West Coast. Can you walk us a little bit through the process from that? Because it's not just as simple of going online, booking an appointment, then getting an appointment in Mexico City.
Yeah, so I'll go through the process in Mexico. I do want to give some good news, which is that on Monday, just this Monday, which was the 14th of December, we had our first regular appointment, E3, happen in Mexico. We weren't sure if it was going to go through because, as you were aware, James, a lot of those regular appointments were getting cancelled, and the only ones that were being honoured were the emergency appointments. So I'll go through the process first. So in Mexico, so typically in Mexico City, to get an appointment there, unlike most of the consulates, you can go online, pay the MRV fee, and then book your appointment. In Mexico, because there were issues with people trying to get refunds on their fees and so forth when they were using credit cards, Mexico has implemented this system now that to pay the MRV fee, it has to be paid in cash on the ground in Mexico at a Banamex or Scotiabank. And so first hurdle is getting your MRV fee paid there in Mexico. We have a relationship with someone now that does that for our clients. And then once you've paid the MRV fee, that will update your portal to be able to book your visa appointment. Then you need to secure a regular appointment. Right now, as of today, we saw that in Mexico City, the next available is in April. That changes all the time. So we did, the young girl that I mentioned that actually had her appointment on Monday, we booked that in October. But in September, say, it was showing that next available was July of this year, 2021. So it just jumps all over the place. So whatever you see today might be different tomorrow. So don't get discouraged on if you see a regular appointment is next in April, because if you keep logging on, you can change the date if something becomes available sooner. So if once you've secured a regular appointment, I am now saying to people, if because of what happened on Monday, if that regular appointment is within a time frame you can use, then potentially you could just wait and see if that regular appointment goes through. If it's not and you need it sooner, then you need to go through an emergency process, visa request, an emergency appointment request, and that involves submitting a reason as to why you need the appointment sooner. And you want to make your reason related to either health, like those same reasons that I mentioned before under the national interest exemption, which is that your role is critical to the economic recovery of the United States, or to one of the critical infrastructure industries, or healthcare, or COVID research, or COVID medical care. So you want to make your reason very compelling, or a humanitarian reason. So sometimes you can, we actually got a emergency visa appointment approved in Mexico City because a client was suffering separation anxiety from her service pair. And the consulate said yes to that, surprisingly. Separation, we had another client that was separated from his spouse. Typically, and that spouse was also a non-immigrant and couldn't travel. So, and that reason worked. So those are the humanitarian reasons. So humanitarian reasons are working. So it doesn't, so if your role is not necessarily one that you can, argue is, really critical, but you do have a humanitarian reason or a compelling reason why you really want to be back, you can use that angle, and those appointments are getting approved under those humanitarian reasons. So that's good. So once you've gotten an appointment secured in Mexico, so most of the consulates around the world, you go and you do your fingerprints at the consulate and then you do your appointment all in one. But in Mexico, it's different. You have what's called an ASC appointment, which is Application Support Center, is what ASC stands for. And it's in a different building. It's in Mexico City, for example, because that's the most popular location right now. It's a few blocks away. So you go and that appointment has to happen first. That's the fingerprinting and digital photo. And then after that appointment, you go to your visa appointment at the consulate. So typically, and pre-COVID, and for the regular appointments, often the ASC appointment is the day before the consulate appointment. But what we've been seeing with the emergency appointments is that they'll allow you to book them both on the same day back to back, which is great, which allows a lot of people, we've had clients actually that have managed to go to their ASC appointment, then their consulate appointment, and then pick up their passport that same day at 2 p.m. So that is really, really good. But yes, just to know that in Mexico City, there are 2 appointments rather than just the one that people are used to. Actually, you know what? I have some really amazing news, James.
What?
All right, I have some amazing news. Today, we had a regularly scheduled appointment in Sydney that went ahead.
My goodness.
So that was scheduled a couple of months ago, December 17th, today. And we were expecting 2 weeks ago, we were expecting, because early December appointments were getting cancelled. And then we were just waiting and waiting and waiting for today's appointment to get cancelled, and it didn't. And he showed up there today and the appointment went ahead. And so this is great. So regularly scheduled appointments in Australia seem to be going ahead now, which is awesome. The difficult part of that is that if you're trying to schedule an appointment now, appointments are quite far down the track. But if you've got a visa renewal that you're going to do that's in March or April, now's a great time to book that appointment in Australia, because chances are you won't need to make an emergency appointment. So I think this is awesome news for Australians.
Well, that's good news that they're processing regular appointments, because getting that emergency exemption is not always an easy thing, as you point out. The one other thing that we noticed about the data is that we're seeing E3s and E3Ds and E3Rs being processed in places like Zagreb and Kuala Lumpur and Hong Kong.
Yeah, so I think I'll address the first question or statement that you made, which is that there are some people in some of the other cities getting visas. You mentioned Zagreb. I think that one in Zagreb was an E3D. So possibly that person got an emergency appointment because they were separated from the E3 principal spouse. And they do consider that when you are separated from a family member, and in honouring a emergency appointment. So we have currently right now, we've got someone going to Stockholm tomorrow morning. It was in Paris. We've had E3 visas issued in Paris, but because of the lockdown in Paris right now, Paris wasn't approving emergency appointments. And so because she was close to Stockholm, we said, what about Stockholm? Because we've done Stockholm before and we know that they are processing the E3. So the first thing we check is, can the person enter that country? So because she was already in Paris, she was able to enter Stockholm. So she's there now. She'll do the appointment there tomorrow morning. And hopefully what will happen is Stockholm will annotate her visa with the national interest exemption, that she's not subject to the ban of entry from being in Europe for 14 days. And then if they do that, and we've managed to get that before with the E3s that we've processed in Europe, it means that then she would be able to travel directly back to the US from Europe without having to stop in Mexico or somewhere else for 14 days first. So Europe, the Schengen countries become an option if either you're exempt from the travel ban. So if you have a US citizen or permanent resident spouse, or you have US citizen children, you're not banned from re-entering if you've been there in the last 14 days. So then that makes it more attractive for some people to try Europe as an option to do their E3. For anyone that isn't exempt, then we have to know that consulate will likely give them the exemption. Otherwise they have to travel through Mexico or Turkey or Croatia for 14 days first anyway. And then in that instance, they may as well just go do their visa in that country. You mentioned Toronto as well, James. Yes. So that was a client of ours, that one. And I know you were surprised. You were like, I don't know how, because it's been difficult, no one can get into Canada. There is a travel ban into Canada, and the people that are exempt from traveling into Canada are Canadian permanent residents, Canadian citizens, and spouses of Canadian citizens and permanent residents. And the other category that we discovered through a client of ours who has a Canadian girlfriend that he lives with is that someone in a de facto relationship with a Canadian that can show that is exempt. So anyone in those categories can enter Canada. When we contacted the consulate in Toronto, they said, look, we will give this person an appointment, but they need to be in Canada they need to have been in Canada at least 14 days before we issue them the appointment. So they went into Canada, they sat there 14 days. We emailed the consulate. We said, here's the evidence that they've been there 14 days. And the consulate scheduled them immediately for that appointment, which was great. They got the visa in their passport, and then entering back in the US, the US doesn't mind. There's no travel ban from Canada into the US, so by air. So that person was able to fly back in to the US, and that was great. And so now one of the first things we ask when we're trying to determine where someone can go, especially now because so many people don't want to have to fly back to Australia because it's impossible to get flights back because of the limitations. The flights that people can get are super expensive. And then when they get there, they've got to do 2 weeks quarantine, which they have to pay for. So going back to Australia is out of reach for many people just because of the expense and the time. So in looking at which consulates they can go to, we ask, okay, number one, where can you travel to? Do you have, and so we ask the questions that could give them an advantage and open up more consulates. So do you have another passport to another country? If you qualify for a passport, if you have nationality of another country, and I know a lot of our Aussie clients do, but that passport might have expired, now's a good time to renew it, especially if you have an E3 visa renewal coming up, because that passport, even though you're not going to be putting the E3 visa in that passport might be your passport to getting a consular appointment somewhere. Are you in a relationship with someone who has a passport to another country? On top of that, we ask, do you have any US citizen children? Or are you married? Often we'll know if they're married and the status of their spouse. But these things can open up options. So that is definitely, you mentioned Tel Aviv as well to me earlier.
There was Tel Aviv, I think I'm just looking at the data, there were 3 E3s and 4 E3Ds in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. So we were able to get people into Tel Aviv, but only because they also had a passport from Tel Aviv. Right now, the new hot place that we've been sending people is to Chile. But Chile has its own complications too. So as of May 2020, Australians need this e-visa to get into, not an E3, but an E visa to get into Chile, which is so unusual because usually Australians can get in wherever they want, but it was a travel restriction and visa that they put in place that was reciprocal, because I think Australia had some visa requirement for Chileans. So that's posed, this e-visa is not so easy to get. So the people that we've sent to Chile have had another passport and they've been able to use that passport to get in there. So we had someone that entered, he did his visa appointment today actually, and he had entered on a Greek passport, and then we had someone fly there today and her appointment's on Monday, and she had a Lithuanian passport. So she had tried to apply for this e-visa because we wanted to see if she could get in on her Australian passport. And when she got to that visa application was still pending. So when she got to the airport was savvy to this e-visa and said to her, you can't enter on your Australian passport. You haven't been issued this e-visa yet. And then she said, well, I also have this other passport, my Lithuanian one. Can I enter with that? And they did. They let her get on the plane and she entered Chile with that. Other consulates we're actively pursuing right now. We're trying Quito because that's close by. We are going to try Peru as well, Jamaica. Most recently, the ones we have tried that have not honored emergency appointments were Belize, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Bogota in Colombia, Barbados, Bahamas. We've been trying to pick consulates that are close by because that's what's most attractive to people. But it is tough right now. A lot of the countries still don't want to let people in and or honor emergency appointments. So when we do find ones, we're very grateful.